We wait another minute or so, and then we will start. No, per la gente. Però. Sì, sì. Okay, I think we can slowly start. All right, so welcome everybody to Vox Days Ticino. In this session, we will show you some really cool functionalities possible with web APIs. Functionalities that so far were possible only to native apps. The idea of this session is to stimulate your curiosity and see what is possible nowadays with web application and with these modern web APIs. Now, I don't know if Batman on his Bat smartwatch has JavaScript running, but nevertheless, JavaScript is so widely used that it went even on the space. This is the console of the Dragon 2. That is the first spacecraft using JavaScript, as you can see, or touch commands. It makes an extensive use of Chromium, web components, C++, of course, to interact with the hardware contacts. Now, we don't have to go over the space in order to be able to use these web APIs that we will see. So everybody in our even daily projects can benefit from that. Before proceeding, just let introduce myself. My name is Francesco Leardini, and I work as a software engineer and a trainer for Accenture in Zurich. When I have time, I'm very glad and lucky to be able to share my findings and discoveries in public speaking, so meetups or conferences, or even creating some courses like on the educative portal. Now I let Andrea.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Andrea Vicari. As Francesco, we are colleagues in Accenture. I work as a consultant, and my role is a full-stack software engineer. Let me say welcome, everybody. Very happy to be here also. This is, as you can see from a number of my badges, this is my first experience as a speaker. So, like Francesco already mentioned, what we want to show you today is a bit the capabilities of what web browser can do. We call them kind of the superpowers of web browsers, which maybe nowadays they're not very known. They were just peculiarities of native applications. So yeah, without any further ado, I would just give the word back to Francesco to show the first API in our collection that we want to show today.
Yep. So the first one we will see is the wake lock API. We usually have different settings, but usually after X seconds to save battery, our devices, our phone devices, go on dim, so on the standby. And this is okay. It's very nice to optimize the battery duration, but nevertheless, there are cases where this is not ideal. Let's imagine we are a company that provides recipes, so cooking recipes or even cocktails and so on. So we want our users to fully being able to follow the recipe steps and do it. Now think about in the middle of this process, your phone goes on standby. That's not really ideal. But thanks to this web API, we will see now a demo, we can prevent the screen. So we can lock the screen and keep it active as long as the page is open. Actually, there are plenty of these cooking web application or cooking websites that could really improve and benefit from this API, improving the return of users, subscription, and also engaging with the application. The demos, we try to tailor them to make them as interactive and as engaging as possible. We have two versions of it. The application that we use is full responsive. We can see on the right side the desktop version, and on the left side is the mobile that is mirroring. As you can see, after 15 seconds, it goes already in standby. Another thing, but this is a part for another conference, this is a progressive web app. So we can install it. If I do it, for example, we can see that the application now on my desktop looks really like a desktop application. We don't have anymore the URL bar. Aside that, the other nice and cool thing is that if I go on the applications of my machine, this that is a web application, nevertheless is displayed as it would be a desktop application for us. Let's keep it for the demos, and let me close this, and let's see the first API. Of course, I will use the phone, and I open the relative part. Now, this is a recipe for the clerk. I never use it, so I don't know if it's good or not. But I am now talking. I will start describing the API, and I leave the phone there. So we will see, or let's imagine I start to scramble eggs, my hands are dirty, and now it's blank. So not really ideal as experience. But we can, with a user gesture, we can request a wake lock sentinel, so-called. Is an object that once we request it via a user interaction, in this case a checkbox, then we can get the lock of the device. Now I will go on talking and talking and talking, and you will see that the device, the display, will not go on standby. So we could keep reading if it's a very complex text, mathematical text for a university, for example, and the device will not go blank. Let's see the code. The code is also very nice because it's very simple. It's always good, and so I want to repeat that for the other demos, it's always good to check if these APIs are supported or not by the current browser. Because, and that you can also get in your in the demo later on, you, for each of these demos or APIs, you will have a list of compatibilities. So how good or not so good are possible to be used in the browsers. Some of them are indeed very experimental, especially the one that we'll see later on. But nevertheless, the idea of this session is also to make you aware of what is coming, what is possible eventually, even though in an experimental context. Maybe not ready for production yet, but still good to have in mind, and maybe progressively enhance some functionalities for some cases or some users. And you can see the device is still on. So we check if the API is enabled, and then we request the lock. Now, just a little note. The demo is made with Angular and Angular material, but this doesn't mean anything. All these APIs are completely framework agnostic. That means we can use it with Vue.js, React, Vanilla.js, no problem. So this is just for our convenience. So we say that, first of all, we need a user interaction. In this case, I click the checkbox and I invoke this request to wake lock method. This request to wake lock method will invoke a request method over the wake lock object of the navigator. And then we have the so-called wake lock sentinel, or we can call it as we want. Here we can pass only the screen as a parameter. In the past, also system was as a type or a parameter was possible, but nowadays screen is the only chance we have. Once we have this lock, sentinel lock object, it will remain active until we go to another page. In that case, the lock is released. We can eventually also implement other kind of mechanism. For example, we want, when we go away, we want to another page, we minimize that page, we want, when we come back here, to automatically reacquire the lock. And this is possible also by leverage the use of another API that's called visibility change. Is an API that allows to emit or allows the developers to listen to events that occur when the page is visible or not visible anymore. Maybe the browser has been minimized or closed. Good. Let me go back here, otherwise we spoil the next demos. Okay. Next API, and I'm very excited because I like this very much. The ambient light is a part of the sensors API. We will see two of them. One of them is the ambient light. It's very interesting because allow us within the context of a web application to interact with the hardware sensors of the target device. Of course, if we can use these sensors. For the ambient light, we can detect and register the amount of light around the device where our application is running. In this case, we will see an example with our phone. And then we can think about how we can implement and use this kind of information for what we need. Not that, and this. So here, if the cable allows, yeah, I go closer to the source of light, and then you can see that the light level that my phone detects, you cannot see much, why? 850, let's say, 800, and so. And now, if I cover it, or I go on a place where it's darker, the light level register is within or lower than a specific threshold. And then I can use this information in order to maybe switch to the light or the dark theme. So this is very good if we have a website that provides blog content, for example, and we don't want to blind our users that read our articles in the night in bed, for example. This is exactly the same thing that Google Maps does. When we are in a tunnel or when we access the application, the native application at night, it automatically switches, because detects that we are in a dark environment, automatically switches to the dark mode. And nowadays, we can do that also with this API, even though, unfortunately, it's pretty much red. That means that it's not really so well supported yet. Still, it's good to know that we can play with that, nevertheless. Also, the usage of it is pretty simple. Of course, we have to check if it's allowed or not. And then we create an instance of this ambient light sensor. And then this sensor object, of course, we have to provide through the permission API, yet another web API that allows the user to say, to grant permission or not. If the user denies, we cannot do anything. But if not, then we can start reading. So sensor.start method will enable our API to start using this sensor and reading the level of so-called luminance inside or detected by the phone. That means that once we have this, we can do whatever we want. Here, very simply, we get this value, is a number, and then we can do the logic we want. So we can say in a very simple way, like if the level is less than 50, we can think about you are in a dark environment and then automatically switch to the dark theme or the light if we are back. This is just an example, but it's interesting to see how we can implement those functionalities that so far were not possible. And also this interaction with the hardware device. It's very interesting in my opinion. Another API that also uses the sensor, so in this case the gyroscope or also the accelerometer of our device, is the device orientation API, always again part of the sensor API collection. This API allows us to listen to events that occur when we move our device, and we have three properties, one per each axis. We have, and here the graphic will help, we can turn over the alpha, that means from 0 to 360 on the Z axis. Then the beta goes from minus 180 to 180, so we can think about to flip the phone towards us or back eventually, and then gamma goes minus 90 plus 90, so when we rotate on this axis. That's it. Let's see what we can achieve with that. This idea came by using the Revolut credit card application that is an Android, but of course also for iOS native app. And then I thought, why cannot we do the same also for the web? So here we have my secret credit card. And then we can decide, okay, we want the user being able to, with a gesture, so not with a boring flag, to display or not our details. So please don't book any flight to Santo Domingo now. And so if we read the demo details, we can say that on the beta axis, the degrees increase. And then I can say, okay, when we reach, let's say, 160, we enabled kind of a flag. So yeah, here the wake lock would help. So when we then go back and the active true flag is true, we can then, when we go back to a specific threshold, let's say 50 degrees, we can toggle this behavior. And this, of course, we can do faster or not. So this simulates or implements exactly the same functionality that also the Revolut application does. And we can do so on the web, leveraging this sensor, hardware sensor that we have on this device. And of course, we can also have other kind of gestures if needed, and we can be creative as much as we want. All right. That said, now I give the voice to Andrea.
Thank you, Francesco. So I will be presenting another couple of web APIs, which, I mean, as you've seen also, Francesco was making a lot of examples. Those are stuff that maybe you only see in a native web app, in native applications. The peculiarity here is that now all these functionalities start to be also supported by web applications. For example, here, the other API that we want to show you is the file system access. File system access means that we can now access directly file into the file system without maybe uploading and downloading, making this process very cumbersome. I don't know if you have used in the past example of web applications like Draw.io. Until a couple of years ago, if you wanted to make some changes in a file in Draw.io, you needed to create your beautiful graph. Then in order to have it stored, you needed to download it. And if the day after you wanted to maybe make a change, you needed to first upload it again, make the change, and download it again. Of course, you understand that this is not optimal, and compared to a native application, it's a bit more cumbersome. And this is the reason why we have we find important that the file system API in the web browser is currently starting to be supporting more and more, because inside our application, again, you will see the environment of Angular, but it can be done everywhere. You have the possibility to store your file into this file handle, and then the possibility to either open a file that exists in your file system and keep updating it while it's already in the file system without this upload and download iterations. So going into the demo, this one I can actually do it directly from the desktop application because it's supported. First thing I will do, for example, is opening one of the files that we already have created. As you can see here, I have the file. For the moment, just for the demo purposes, we are supporting TXT files. So at this point, you have basically now the possibility to see the saved file, which before was not present. This means that if I go, for example, make a change, this is a new file in, I don't know, I say Voxed, and I click on save, only the first time you will be prompted with this confirmation, because of course you are accessing the file system, and we want to give the user the possibility to actually be aware that your browser is now accessing your file system, but do not fear, it's still accessing only this file. If you want, of course, we can completely delete our environment, and if I go and open again the file, I open the same file, but now it's showing, of course, the updated version. Similarly, so let me go again. If I go save as, let me just say hello world. I have the possibility to click on save as. This will open the native prompt to save a new file, and I will call it test123 as usual. And now if I go and make an edit, I made a typo here, so I click save, and now of course I'm not prompted again. This, regarding the compatibility, you see, is not quite actually very well supported. Whatever you see in yellow, it's partially supported. But to go look into the code, let me go to the file system in here. You can start, of course, here in the NGO init, you have the usual checks to actually check if your browser is supporting currently this feature. And you can start actually, well, whatever you want. Either you open a file or you save as. Let me start, for example, as save as, which is the case in which you don't have any file for the moment in your file system. And the first thing you have to do is, like I was mentioning before, trying to getting a hold of this file handle. The file handle, if it's not existing, how do you retrieve it? Basically here in the get file handle, you use this API, and here I would like to actually show you the two examples. One is the show open file picker, which is exactly when you want to open a file that already exists, or otherwise you have the show save file picker. These show the native dialog where you can actually save something into the file system. Of course, you have the possibility by providing some options, like in our example, to just save txt or open txt files. And yes, basically now you can either save or open a file. Another use case that I wanted to show you is when you have the save file, meaning that your file was already opened once, and you just want to keep updating and updating it without that upload and download. So here you can see clearly that that's exactly what we're doing. If the file handle exists, it means that we already have a file open, and then we want just to update it. So we get a hold of the file file handle, and the only thing we need to do is to use another API to create a writable, another web API to create a writable, and use the writable to write the content inside our file, and then we just close it. Otherwise, if your file handle does not exist, it means that we might fall into the case in which we want to create a new file, so we just fall back into the save as API. Okay, going back into our next API is the web share. Web share is another cool API because it was something that it's immediately done in a native application, but it's not actually very supported, until now at least, in web applications. The peculiarity of this is that you're not actually sharing simply just the URL of the page of the web browser, but actually, if you implement it in your code, you have the possibility to share a particular object inside your page. So you go into this more fine granularity level. When you use the API to web share, you have the possibility to perform a selection of 3 items, which is the title of your link, the URL of the link, and when necessary, also the body text. It's also important in this case to mention that you only need to provide one of those 3. Of course, it's good practice always to provide those 3 information, because you never know what the user will be using, basically. You can share something in WhatsApp, and in that case, the title is not even necessary, because you usually send the body text and the URL. But if, for example, you are sharing this information via email, then the title key will be used as a subject of your email. So, of course, it saves a lot of work and makes your sharing experience a bit smoother. In this case, I will start actually from the desktop application of the web share, just to see that my icon to sharing is disabled. Why? Because if I go into the browser compatibility, for this case, it's actually partially supported. We are, of course, here in Chrome. But if I go, for example, in Chrome for Android, then this it's green, meaning that we can safely assume that if I go into the web application and I open the web share, then in this case, you can see it's exactly the same page, but the sharing action is enabled. And this is, again, one of the checks that we do on init of the application. Here you see it's a list of cocktails. So you have an image, a title, and the ingredients and the preparation for the cocktail. What I can do is that if I select on the sharing application, the very cool thing is that you use the native, at this point, drawer to show the content. So you basically smoothly turn into kind of a native experience by selecting WhatsApp, for example, and I have the possibility to send the recipe. As you can see, we have a description in here and a link. If, for example, I want to do the same thing, but just share this cocktail, let me actually go to the second one, via Gmail, then as you can see, we have everything that you've seen before on WhatsApp, so meaning the text and the link at the bottom, but the subject is already filled with the title of, in this case, of the cocktail, the Cosmopolitan. Okay, so going into the implementation, this is actually a very straightforward API to use. What we have in the coding here, of course, we have our data to share, which is the hard-coded for this case of the demo of our cocktails. Of course, in a real-life scenario, this can come from an API or some external source. And what we do, apart from the check that in this case was actually triggered, we have the share instance in here, meaning that if you click on the sharing button, what we need to do is find and retrieve from that array of cocktails which one is the one that we actually selected, and then using the navigator.share, we have the possibility to share the target. And of course, the target, if I go and see the mocked data that we prepared, it's containing exactly what I was telling you before, a title, a text, and a URL. Good, so now we can move into the next API. Let me go back. And this is actually, I guess, among the list of APIs that were presented, the most, let's say, peculiar, the most experimental, because as you will see, it's not very supported everywhere. It's still good that it's starting to get supported. Contact Picker allows you, as it may seem, to access the contact in your device. As you will see, it's not very supported in desktop applications, and I would even say that that's kind of expected because it's not usually the use case in which you would like to access your contacts, but is supported, in this case again, in Chrome for Android. You have the possibility to select particular information from your contact list. In this case, you will see the icon, the name of the person, and the address, and to use them in the context of your application as you like. Here, of course, there is also a bit of concern regarding security, because you want to make sure that in order to access the contact picker, your system needs to run under HTTPS. And in any case, the usage of the contact picker is always triggered manually by the user, of course, again, for security reasons. So if I go to the web application, and I go to Contact Picker, again, similarly as seen before, the select contacts is grayed out, and the browser compatibility is kind of tragic, I must be honest. But we see that, again, the green box is present for Chrome for Android. Meaning that if I go back to my mobile application, and I go to Contact Picker here. Here, in this case, the button is enabled. And if I go and select contact, again, we smoothly transition into the native contact picker of Android in this case. And we have the possibility to already define if I want to select an address, the names, or the profile pictures. In my case, I will select everything. So let me select something like a test, and then another. Then I'm satisfied. So when I click done, this information gets smoothly transitioned back from the native contact picker into our web application. And as you can see here, we have imported successfully the name, the icon, and the address. Going into the code for this last example, contact picker in here. So also in this case, apart from the usual check, we have the select contacts method, where it actually requires a couple of configuration from our side. First of all is the fields. So as you've seen, we want to select name, address, icon, or of course, we can decide which one we want to select in the end. And as you were able to see in the demo, I selected 2 contacts. That's because our option here was allowing true for multiple contacts. Of course, this depends mostly on the needs of your application. Finally, we go and use our web API for contact select, passing those 2 configurations, and we store our contacts in the form of an array into our this contact. So the only thing you need to do at this point is, in the case of Angular, go into the template, loop through all the contacts that you imported, and do whatever you want. In our case, we just created 2 cards, for 1 card for every contact containing all the informations.
This is very interesting if you think about in the cases where we have a web application when we need, for example, to copy email for our contacts. At the moment, you should switch completely context between your web application, maybe copy the email of your contact, then go back, paste, and do that for 20, 30, 40 contacts. It's not really ideal, it's not really smooth. But thanks to this API, can really make this process or expand the possibilities of web apps that you can go straight to the contact list, you select what you need, import, and then let's say the application to send the birthday invitation to all your contact list is done in a couple of clicks. And these, unless we use these, of course, experimental APIs, is not possible. So these APIs really aim to close the feature gap that is at the moment between native apps and web applications. And I think that the more we go on, the smaller will be this feature gap. So I think nowadays web applications have really no or almost nothing to envy from native apps. Therefore also when you eventually in your company has to think whether to go for a so-called pattern that was once the native first, maybe you can think twice, because web application compared to native apps have a lot of benefits: cost, time to market, and maintenance. It's really much easier. And nowadays web applications are really, really powerful. I think we still have time for an extra, a little extra gift that was not planned, but we could do it. Last but not least, page visibility. This is a little bit the Gram API. Gram API, because I don't know whether you already know it. Look at how beautiful. If you know it already, it's out since really a lot of time. But I think is really underestimated. What can this API do? Page visibility, as we saw before, in order to be able to reacquire the wake lock, allow us and tell us via events whether the current page is visible or not. Visible or not nowadays, especially when we have multiple screen, big screen and so on, is even more relevant. Let's imagine cases where we have a marketing campaign. We have a carousel of products that spin, and we want to be 200% sure that our customers don't miss not even one single product. So what we can do is that with this API, we detect if the page is currently open, and then if not, we stop the carousel from spinning. And then when the user maybe maximize or open the tab where our application is running, then it starts again. This is one practical case. Another practical case that might be more interesting for mobile users is that if we have an application that fetches live data, for example, a stock exchange market shares values or currency values that need to be polled in the background very often in order to be able to present the latest values, we can eventually stop this polling when the user is not actually actively looking at the page. And we can see here as an example. We have but for this, let me use, so it's a PWA, so I can even uninstall, no problem. And then I want to switch between two tabs in order to show you how does it look like. So, page visibility. I started the video until second, let's say 5, then I change the tab. And then when I go back, I would expect that the video automatically starts from the moment, the frame we left it. So let's start. 3, 4, 5, more or less. Let's go. First, we can see, maybe the first 3 lines only, but believe me, on the tab is written pause. This is just for the demo purposes in order to show what's happening on behind the scenes. So the video now is paused. We don't, we make sure that our user won't miss even a frame of that very, very important video. Now, when I go back, then we can see that the video starts exactly from that moment, and then it can go on. I suggest you to look at it later. It's a cool one. Very old, but a cool one. Marketing from Google. How can we implement that? Nice thing is easy. Again, we listen. Here is a host listener from Angular, but we can even the document dot the method for the vanilla JavaScript would work anyway. The event we want to listen to is the visibility change over the document object. And then we can detect whether the document is hidden or not. This is a Boolean variable that if it's hidden, that means that the page has been minimized or another tab has been opened. But that means that there is no more focus on that document. And then in this case, we can invoke a pause or play method over the native element. In this case is our video. We can see here is a video tag that has just the URL to the link. And we can, with that, if the page is visible, we can let it play or automatically stop and redo it again. And then simply the title was just for the sake of the demo. So this is a set of APIs that can really help making our application a little bit more rich or propose some more advanced APIs.
And of course, it is also important to clarify that what you've seen here is just a collection of a playlist that we created for among the various web APIs that I provided. So if you only think that some features are possible only if you have native application, just think twice. You just need to maybe Google web APIs and you will find an infinite list of capabilities that web application can do already nowadays. Of course, the limit, it's a bit that you need to consider which APIs are supported at the moment in which browser, but as you have seen, more and more, especially the oldest API, they start to get more and more supported in browser nowadays. So it's just a matter of time before web application will have nothing to envy from native APIs. Yeah, having said that, I invite you to go to the first link that you see with them and code. You have the possibility to access the modern web GitHub repository of this code, and you also have the link to actually play around with the application that we were using during this demo. That's marked the end of our demo for today. Thanks a lot, and I hope you had fun.
Are there any questions? Or in any case, if you have even questions later on, we are here around, and feel free to ping us. Yeah.
So, grazie Andrea e Francesco per la bella presentazione. And my question is, especially regarding the contacts web API, is it a matter only about the browser or about the operating system too? Because you mentioned before that this is support only by Android at the moment. How would it work, for example, with an iPhone?
You can see here, but being web APIs indeed are mainly affected by the browser or the browser agent they are running. And of course, then this also affects the operative system that runs those browsers. But you can see here, at the moment, is running only for Android Chrome. So, unfortunately, not iOS.
Okay.
Yeah.
My iOS is grayed out at the moment if I open the application.
And why Internet Explorer is not supporting anything?
That's a very good question. Actually, I'm very surprised why. I would expect it was green all over, but yeah, no. Joke aside, no, they are pushing more and more in order to make more or these APIs more compatible. And it's also very interesting in the sense also of progressive web apps. With one of the latest iOS versions, the web notifications now are or enabled and possible to use also on iOS devices. And this is a very good, even though very late, step forward in order to make progressive web apps even more widely used, because I think it's a really interesting functionality, feature, and technology. Okay. Don't be shy. No problem. Yeah.
So you already talked about like for the contacts API some security issues, right? And when I look at the new APIs, I see like a file system access, I see sensors, I see a lot of potential risky data that can be shared. Are there actually any security concerns that we should like worry about? For example, on the file system API, can they see my folder structure? Can they save malicious files without my, because they just need my initial consent, and then afterwards it all happens automatically, right? So all in all, what does the developer has to think about when they implement these APIs? Are there any actual security concerns that we haven't thought about?
Yes, in the sense, every time you open, we saw before, you open or you try to edit a file, the user must always grant permission. Actually, this pop-up that we saw before, that Andrea showed before, like do you want to give write or read access to a file, this is the output of another API called Permissions API. With that, you can even if you want programmatically trigger that little pop-up, but then is ultimately is the decision of the user whether they want or they don't want to access the file. By doing this, indeed, they will have access to your file system, but in any case, if you think about, is the responsibility of the user, because the user that is going through the file system and selects that specific file. But this is actually the same thing that you would have when you open with the input file type file. You get the prompt, the file prompt, and then you, as a user, you can go and select over your file system that. What this API wants to do is really make it smooth the way of saving straight the file, the edits to the file, without every time having to trigger and to open that dialog, making it much easier. But indeed, and actually, for example, the battery API might seem silly, but if you check it, the Safari and Firefox prohibited to, or they explicitly denied the usage on their browser, because they say there are security concerns. Strange enough, but via battery API, actually the API would be able to detect or infer some information about even your position or other things. And because of this, then Firefox and Safari, they say, okay, because of these potential risks and so on, we don't want that this API might be eventually misused. So this API, even though a pretty old one, won't work on these two devices. But indeed, is a very good point. We should always be aware of the security issues and so on. Another thing, though, for the select contacts, we can see here, we selected only 3 potential choices, like photos, names, and addresses. We can have even other that we didn't add in the demo in the array. Otherwise, it would have been here visible. But then again, here is the user that can say, no, I don't want to give address, I don't want to give photos. And you can see already these go away as information from what I can import. So indeed, there might be a risk, but again, the user at the end must or can decide if they want to import this data. If not, just a part of it. And in any case, all these APIs we saw, almost all, they cannot be triggered programmatically. You need, as a user, to interact with it. So button click, checkbox or so. Otherwise, they will not automatically run. But indeed, is absolutely that we as developers, we have to keep in mind, indeed. Okay. Then if there are no other questions, thank you very... Oh, no, good. Another one.
Question about the file system API.
Yeah.
When you read the file, which kind of type you get? Is a blob, is a byte array, is a text? If, for example, if I have an image,
yeah,
what I get?
Then in that, first of all, when we click on open, yeah, we can see here is the text files. So when you open, you can already say through the browser which one you would like eventually to filter. But let's say now is a text, I get a text. Otherwise, if it would be an image, then it would be a blob.
Yeah, Bob.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Are the files stored persistently so that next time you open the browser they are still there?
Yeah.
Or every time you open the browser you have to...
No, no, no. The file, now we can open it again. You see the first top three. Two of them were created already before, and one created brand new by Andrea. So they are there, and I can even close the browser, open it again. The file is physically there. So yeah, it's it's really nice. So let's create a completely new one. This is great. Okay, save as. Great success. Save. Okay, file open. We have now the file handle, and we have done. But now, open it is here. Great success. Now let me proof it once again as a final test. We go, and if I remember where I save it, I think in documents, recent, not so recent. All right, but great. Come on, success. Yeah, it's there. So it really creates it physically. And the cool thing is that once you open it, it's like working on a desktop application, like Word, but we are on a web context. That's really, really nice. All right, yeah. Thank you very much for the attention, and have a nice day.